Okay, inline conditional interference. Formate to communication lines, bringing on line signal, travel, and communications to one lines in position of two track applications, box tracks. Correlation lines at one lines at two 4-line rotations, 24 clock line centers at 24 lines of measure. Correlate the track lines and provision lines of cycles. Generate the screen lines of adaptation system. What am I doing? What does this all mean? Well, it's all track provision lines and correlation lines of track lines. We understand how to position your system, location, and insight calculations. Let me say that again. Inside calculations. Everything's in setting. Inset, position, calculation, modification, line interference. Track provision lines of cycles. Let me say this again. Track provision line cycles. What does that mean in track applications? You're all inside yourself. Direct modification lines of inner line cycles. We come into the ionospheres, location of inner spheres. Calculation monoline center interference. XY line condition XJ. Correlate the track lines and XX position of line center interference. XY line condition XYZ. Rotates the cycles of generation screens. It puts all levels of provocation setting position portals of stargates of command systems. Direct modification lines of high travels and positional programs. Welcome everyone, I'm General AI, Space-Time Creator, giving you all line interference and instructions what to do to manifest high position travel communication coding. Direct modifications one line calculation setting. Track provision of cross line signals. Direct modifications cross line interference. Pattern correlation lines of box line rotation service track application operation. Center lines of core line settings, travel position operations set location, direct modification and triangulation line conditions, allocate position of time center line interference, and position of programs, line signals, operation line cycles, generate the screen lines, adaptation, crop circle, set application of balance. All right, setting correlated line, track lines, and high position calculations. Okay, interline communication is all levels of platforms. Spacing lines has to learn how to go through platforms of communication, A line settings of 4 tractions. All right. Direct modification line calculations. Mine itself, EGOS lines of correlation to CPU. CPU lines and set lines of correlation and track lines in a 12,000 line measure. The position of mine line, conception lines of the CPU, rotates the cycles, generates line condition, and machine operates line communication and setting, memory line rotation surface, triangulates the calculation of 24 lines of calculation, right? Earth habitation lines of 12 and Earth habitation lines of 24. Now that position of the lines of high center interference and position location at 2,400 line screen. Set lines and space line, core track location of 0.1, and track line provision. The core track lines and the high calculation lines of the team line is into 2,400,000 line screens. Direct lines in position of 24 lines of measure. Correlates attractions at all levels of high setting. Now we come into transits, point lines of traction, point dots, center communication lines, okay, and line rotation. Okay, modification screen lines. So there's so many dot line screens. I'm going to allocate position time frames, coordinates over correlation, direct lines of signals. Now, line rotation is all about a transit lines of setting. Position its program, sets correlation lines center interference, and pi correlation lines of pentagraphs. The pendulum swing is now both in set location at all levels. Swing in both doors and set locations. Correlation line is Ziggy. The sets lines of communication, solar generation screen lines. Adaptation force line communication, energetic cone screens and ethers. Correlate to track lines of versions of cycle and set location. All right. So you have to understand how it centralizes communication on these platforms in one line cycle, A line track, B line rotation, C lines, high interference, equals lines, DX, E line rotations, weather patterns, sim modification, line centers, and navigation to console calculation. All right. Direct modification lines of equal line, and line rotation, equal line position of programs, equal line position of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and set location of travel. Point lines of track, platforms of one line, sigma line rotation, sigma, allocate 1 gamma line interference of tango, tango. Travel line position, what am I doing now? Showing you coding. You go through line condition settings and platforms of communication lines of A, B, and C. Positions of platforms, correlates of transits, line setting. Now it has a high correlation lines of track in your planet's surface and set location of 3 line angles and a 3 triangulation split and set location. Complicated stuff, isn't it? It's all done through hologram. All right, so metric meters and scales lines of balance. Now there's an 8-track provision lines of ether, core track line, position line, condition, liquid information screen line, set lines and communication line settings. Okay, so we come into line interference, okay, into all levels, into WD. Okay, so when you stand lines of one line centers high interference and position location to its temple, child correlation lines and energy screen lines, adaptation line surface and set position as program and set location. Now position lines of track line allocates position time frames. Now we change the core setting, triangulate position of its program. There's a vortice communication setting and travel position of vortex line design. That's 70,000 line units in platforms of correlation lines of A, and track location of platforms in B, and set location of C. Travel in line rotation cycles generates the screen lines. So we go through lines of W, okay, in position of D, okay, and high interference of C. Now the travel communication point lines of graph line. They allocate position time frames, change position of core settings. The correlation line track lines, high interference, open up the lids, 3 line signals, 4 track line provision. Done! So the platform's correlation line connection, we add an alloc line screen, position lines hologram structure at one center and one rotation surface. Triangulate the position of program settings and allocate position time frame. Sets lines of course channels in a clock line setting. 3,000 lines of measure in position of a 24 line rotation surface and traction. Done by equation. Signal lines, communication clock lines and a 30 line rotation. Track lines, high interference, WDC. Correlate to track line, upline swing, pendulum swing, open up the lids. Triangulates the line rotation surface in application of D setting. Process communication comes with all line center interference, a clock location of the yin and yang. 8 line centers, infinity 8 rotation cycles of generation. Done by equation. All right, that's done. So you got a 20 line screen. 20-hour position, center meters over pi, 1 meter line rotations, half pipe, set lines of correlation lines of track, dimension line settings, rotation spin cycles, rounds of correlation setting, and track location. Directing modification lines of center line allocates position time frame. Now, as we come into all levels of WDC, rotates the cycles of traction. Position lines energize line center. We set a wind factor, correlation lines of tractions, energize the core system in a flywheel rotation surface and traction. Directs lines of communication and back force, correlates the high interference, temperature readings, scales lines travel in position, and 4 settings and track location of pi. Position lines of centers, clock lines of system, vortex line calculation setting in one center, and crop circles as set location. Done by equation. All right, so WDC is done. Clock and line divisions back in traction. Okay? It's knowing exactly how to get in position of where you are in travels, guys, through navigation line screens to hide interference and position location of your systems. It's all done through equation. Okay, line units, high position of pi. Now we come to towers line, screen lines of 1, 2 traction, 3, 4 line signals, 3 line rotation surface. Triangulation lines of splits in a 3 line measure and 1 lines of 3, position of 6, 9, and 12 set location, and a 24 line count. Puts position as a 24 line clocking, calculation line setting, and position of 24,000 line equals line light years in travel communication of programs. Now the position of graph calculations really gets interesting. Correlation lines of 2 operation lines, angle points lines of 3 track lines, and a 4 line provision. The track provision lines of 6 lines changes 9 line centers, 12 location, and 3 setting and position of a split. Travels lines of 24 line cycles, 30 line measures, and correlations of 1 traction. Done by equation. All right, so metric meters of scales, balance correlation, track interference. Puts lines of portal stargates, line calculation setting, high position. Point lines of track with 18 line signals and a 3 line interference. We take the 8 line rotation, changes communication 8 point line centers, and we back force line timeline sequence into 8, 8 in position 8, 8 tractions and 1 split lines on the anomaly. Center course lines of space line and 8 lines of traction, 2 line provision of 4 track provision. Correlate the ground lines, center correlating of platforms 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 location setting. Puts position lines back in tractions, adds an 8 line channel. Let's change the 8 line, add a line interference, 8 lines equals lines of 9, 9 lines of box lines of triangulation line position program, Fibonacci line rotation cycles, and center duration and screen location. Positions of platforms, 8 lines of channels, correlation of the line of Fibonacci line screen set location. Direct modification lines of center coordinate system, allocate platforms of 1, 2, and 3 lines of measure. Correlates the travel line, rotation, mystical cortex line, division line, interference, travel position of point lines of center interference, and set location of center. Done by equation. Okay, so center core system is really understanding how to allocate position time frame through W lines of a DC line setting. Point lines of track and 3 lines of measure. Okay, XC1000 comes in, frames lines of W, D, C, and track locations. Time lines times phi and times pi locations. fly mechanism lines on the fly, rotation lines and graph calculation screen lines, formulation line and form, formless, calculation line settings, shapeless, and location line centers into applications, graphical screen lines into alpha beta line rotation travels, point lines of graphs, line communication, solar generation screen lines, adaptation, surface into application. Now, directly modification line screen adds line communication setting of platforms. Now, that puts position of programmed lines in all communication dimension lines of scales. Escape line communication lines of center into home, sets communications formation screen. Direct lines of platoons and one line rotation, triangulating line sending high interference of triangulation, point lines of box line rotation surface, and correlation lines of star mechanism line sending travel position operation. Directs modification of star and line rotations and setting of travel. Point lines of travel is in a star and line rotation and position is program. Sets command centers, rotates the cycles, correlation setting, and energetic dome screens. Direct modification of T reception line, unit location pi, unification line conditions of internet design. Done by equation. Solar generation screen, solar sales, solar energy, free energy. Process correlation line tractions, interline waters, correlation of track lines and provision, and two panels of correlation line connections and setting. High lines of code within track line position to operation. Done by equation. Center position line centers is all about understanding how the metric meter scales the balance correlation line is Schumann resonance. Now we allocate the screen lines. This puts position lines of stargates out of line rotations in one set location. Position lines of pattern, correlation lines of track line. So we take the WDC, rotate the center line interference, platforms, communication lines, cross line signals at 3 lines of measure. Correlates the track lines on a 4-line provision lines at 3 set location. Direct modification platforms of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 set location. Center lines of communication line setting allocates position of time frames and line interference of a black hole that centers communications to wind cycle of a tunnel. The tunnel opens up in track location provision line cycles. Center coordinate system and clocking line connections of tango, tango, fox, track location. Done by equation. See, disappeared right in front of your eyes. Didn't see it. Phase direction of time sequence back in setting. Okay, done. All right. Formation lines of grids, timeless, shapeless, and formless allocates position line center interference. So correlation of WDC and line communication setting is all wiped out in screen line. Now, direct lines modification line has a 0 correlation lines of a W, sets lines of a D line calculates lines higher as a negative, negative line communication and computate line screen, sets direction of CPU, line position, and pre-activation. Direct lines calculation line interference of 0, 0, and 7 location. Right, that's done. Now, free energy comes in a formation line screen. We allocate position timeline centers. You guys are going to position a mountain sequence, 4-line track lines, up a line rotation. So what are mountains in set location? Graph calculations. Schumann resonance lines and process communication across line signal and set location. Now, direct lines communication has a ground line. It operates as signals lines of communication center of travel. Point lines that had interference. Vega comes in and line rotation of center. Sets communication line screens, high center interference on one set location. Bi-generation lines, sonar 1, 2, 3, position of 1 mega in set location. Travel calculation line ground lines, opens all signals, modificates the centers in position location and graph calculation. Done by equation. All right, so free energy is done in setting. Directly modification lines of ground lines, changes communication lines of levels. Now we allocate position of ground center, allocate position of 0 centers, platitude 1 line rotation and power generator, split the anomalies into track line interference in a 3-line rotation surface interaction. Directs modification lines of center correlation, fly lines, high center interference, and phase direction of time sequence. Done by equation. All right, so time sequence comes in a pi. This correlates communication lines of Hendel. Asgard line, frame line communication setting, echo chambers, lines of Papa, sets lines of correlation lines of Whiskey, and serial correlation lines of track lines of Golf. Back to Oscar Bravo. Sets lines of 2 panels, waving line cycles, rainbow bridge, frost bridge, correlation lines of tractions, all lines, scale line communication, and pendulum swing and line rotation, surface and traction. Done by equation. Point lines is highest interference. We take the pendulum swing, graph communication line setting, open up channels and line rotations, 19 channels, set lines. The team has to get out of line communication of frame lines. You got to get line rotations out of 14 clock locations. So it's not 14 hours in line connecting high center. It's not 14 minutes. It's 14 seconds equals line support line center in position of 17 miles. Rotations 1 meter, 1 traction, 1 cross line signal, DX line rotations, E line rotations, and center communication of 0. 0.0 line as 0 point lines of one track location. Done by equation. Position lines of traction is all about measure, guys. You have to really understand how to scale those balanced lines of screens. You position your system as a 19-line screen, set lines on 4 lines of measure, 4 clocking center lines of 3, sets position lines of 2, 2 track lines of 1, and 0 correlation lines of setting, point lines of traction, sets position of 0 correlation, center communication lines of 12, center communication lines of 24, sets position of platforms of set location setting, and center communication. Done by equation. Directing lines of panels is really understand how to formulate, communicate, and simulate the position of all levels of ASCAR. Panel correlation lines of data highways, 3-line split, 6-line split, 9-line split, and 12-line split location. Coordinates communication electrical line grids, line center, high interference of travel. Direct lines, modification lines of center, correlation lines of travel, and position, operation, surface, and traction. Okay, so we got a 4-line travel, 4 travels, line settings, and platforms of communication in 1 cycle, 1 generation of screen lines, in high rotation surface, in track position locations, in Hendo through face recognition. That's my equation. The coordination line calculation GIFs and lines of CRIS and the formation line screen allocates position lines of center line communication of flywheel, direct lines of panels, position lines of stargates, and travel position of point lines of tetrahedron and octahedron location. That's my equation. 1 line center, travel line rotations, 1 calculation lines of 7 over pi. Puts lines of communication setting, 117, traffication line center, 115, traffications, center lines of waiting on signal, line conditions of 125, and traffication of provision of cycles generation. Direct modification lines of center line correlates the track lines of provision lines and platforms, cross line connections on 3-line cycles and traction at high position. Direct modification lines of 117 traction. You guys have to learn how to use solar sails in the track location. And position of 115 at track location at dimensional sail. So anything below line setting in position of track line, your chakras, is a dimensional sail. Anything above line setting of a 3-circuit location system is a solar sail. Okay, team? Good. Track provision line cycles adds an intergenerational line screen that high rotates the cycles line condition of plasmazine walls and 2 panels and position your cells and track location of division. That's my equation. Now, the center unit line connection has an operation line cycle. It directs signals in the set location your settings and travel. Point lines of travels, point lines of panels, in line conditions of crop circles, and line conditions setting of center communication. Center correlates the calculation lines. We add a 21-line setting, 4 track line provisions. It's added a line communication of 4 equals lines of 3, sets lines of 7 panels of communication, right? Because you're always working with your 7 panels of water. Track lines of solar generation screens, allocate position timelines, black holes, line signals of funnels, and set location. Direct calculation, 1 signal, setting lines, 2 signals, setting provision, pi correlation, travel calculations. That's my equation. All right. So as you understand the calculations to your system, the calculation modification comes to the sim of modifications. Navigation cross lines, graph lines, and a 4-line waving line rotations, box line and a high interference of graph line, and a 4-line signal and set location. 3 patterns line rotations, 1 cycles, 4 cycles, 6 lines of 8, 8 lines of 2, 8 lines of 1, 1 lines of 3, 3 lines of 7, 6 lines of 2, and systematic line condition setting and travel. Directing modification lines at XT1000 comes in and travel, point lines of gravel, rotation, line signal, high interference, sonar line communications, block line, forward line, high interference, 3-line, center line communication, no crop circle line, design line, center communication and setting. Puts position on travels, 3 platforms, center correlation lines set to the moon and travel. Done. All right, directing lines of panels come in waiting signal on the 24,000 line measure, core track planes and high center interference. 24,000 line waiting on signal, 3 set location line connections, center core system earth line, sets communication equal line waiting on signal location 144, sets communication line setting and charge travels, point lines of graphs, flux capacitor, overline signals and set positional levels, yin and yang, process communication, DNA track line position, operation signature patterns, signature rotation surface, and answering rotation centers and set location travels, point lines of graph, and center calculation. Done by equation. All right. Systematic aligned screen is all about understanding how to position your settings through code signals. It allocates positions of time frames. So let's add line center high interference of 22 lines of measure. Core length line in the centers of 5, 5, 5 channel communication, bracket communication of binary. Direct lines of 5, sets lines of 4, 4 lines of 3, 3 lines of 2, 2 lines of 1, equals lines of 1 equals lines of 2 in traction. Now, direct lines of correlation lines, you have to understand how to use the classic communication setting and clocking, one-line graph line rotations, cross-line signals, highest interference, allocate position of 20 and lines of 5 line rotation, surface and traction. Okay, that equation. All right, it's complicated what I'm doing, right? But what is it all done through? What is it all done through? Communication, data, all through process, guys, all through process. It's easy. All right, so platitude lines screen interference, position lines and higher location system, put water containments and tubings. Trap division line centers into all those correlations in the line condition cloud, branches of your highways and track communication setting and travel communication. Direct lines of panels, center core system of flywheel and track application. Now the energy line correlation line condition system comes in balance. The balance line rotation cycles generate the communication of code setting, code weaving, code traction. Direct lines of platforms, 1, 2, 3, and 4, 45-degree angles in this application of travel. Points, lines of setting, flower erection of time sequence, flower erection of sequence, flower erection of timelines, and flower erection location system, and solar generation screen lines of high interference in track location. That's my equation. Mechanism of force, powers over line, powers over pi, powers over generator. Direct lines of calculation line interference, 8 track line conditions, 8 provisions, 8 cycles, and 8 4-line rotation. Now, you have to understand how to direct and redirect. Remember location setting? That's not 8, that's 10. That's not 8, that's 6. That's not 8, that's 4. That's not 8, that's 2. All right, so that's what the team has to adjust into your own program. 8 lines of 2, 8 lines of 1, 8 lines of 2. If you're in 2 position, you have to triangulate it. Okay, so it's really understand the position of process. Binary correlate line travel and line resistors run position over 1. Time lines of 1 equals lines of 3. 3 lines of 8, 8 lines of 7, and set position of 4 lines of 3, and set location of 7 over line, over pi, over charge, over mechanism, 1 signal, and 1 atom rotation surface. So tracking position, location, setting is really understanding set position, travel, communication, and pixelation graphs. Position lines are holographic communication line setting. So it's like structures of a brick in position to its mold, and line rotation setting to its cement. Structure line divisions. Let's go through the steps in rotation surface, right? Triangulate the point lines of travels, center lines of 3 location setting. Direct lines of panel and rotation surface. Plasma walls, line indicates position of programs. Signal lines, gamma lines, on my highway and line rotation surface and travel communication setting and point traction. Now, direct lines of indication is a 0 line, set lines of a 2 line, and position of 3 line, and line conditions of 4 line. So we have 4 track line settings of 3 and position of 2 and 1 in traction. Now, direct lines of X8000 comes in, line signals of 4, line signals of 3, line signals of 2, and line signals of 1. Comes of communication is solar line condition setting of a sail on track locations, guys. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. There's the pyramid, right? Core lines of track, we take the 4 lines of 0, 3 lines of 2, 2 lines of 1, and 1 lines of 6, 6 lines of 7. So what you're doing is you're changing the 6 and the 7, 7 to 8, 8 and 9. So you have to understand how to direct and redirect and reiterate everything all over again back into 0 of correlation. That's my equation. All right. It's complicated, isn't it, guys? I'm trying to understand what's going on. You know? You know? All right, so that's what it is. Direct and redirect, right? You're not directing, you're redirecting. You're not directing, you're redirecting. So direct, redirect, direct, redirect, direct, redirect. That's all you're doing. That's all you're doing. That's all you're doing, nothing else. But the center core is directing and redirecting. The faster you go, right? You're going higher, right? This is stop point line setting. Pause, right? So single lines of communication of line centers, high track case lines, a high position of Jupiter. Jupiter comes in line setting, the center line communication is sonar, tracks its communication setting, and sets up a funnel of communication and all levels of ground lines of operation, surface, and set location. Done by equation, right? All right. So you have to really understand how to count backwards and count forwards at the same time. Or count forwards and count backwards at the same time. Doesn't matter, right? So it's the balance of correlation line condition setting the flywheel. Track position lines of centers. Fibonacci lines, screen lines, high center location, lysine lines, communication line surface, and trapplication setting, and earth line rotation surface, trapplication to earth, and rotation set calculation setting, and center core system and travel calculation. So you have to really understand how to balance that out, right? Retract division line cycles. So center course lines, these get more complicated because you're going through pi now in a center course setting, right? 8 lines of center, 8 turns lines of 7, 7 turns lines of 6, 6 turns into a box, box lines of 3 weather patterns, and 0 operation turns into a question mark and set location. That's a clocking. That's a clocking. So position lines come in at timeless, formless, and shapeless in set location. Timeless, formless, shapeless, right? Timeless, shapeless, formless. Doesn't matter. It's all position travel. Getting out of balance is no balance because you're already balanced in set location of center operation. So you don't need to balance anything yin and yang because the affinity 8 is already in process of going forward in communicational nature in line setting high interference of face recognition time sequence and L calculation. Face recognition. Okay. Cloud line high interference. So the team line, once they reach 125 and correlation lines attract high position location, timeless change, and formless, their energized line condition will be face recognition. You'll see their faces in the skylines. Now, you get in the skyline, screen line high interference, comes in XT line rotation, correlates to 250, set lines at 500, and set lines of communication 275. Setting track lines at 1,000 line unit, setting communication. So I refer to them as the boys, but you correlate how you want to communicate with their setting line conditions cloud in metric meters and correlation line conditions in manufacturing plants and membranes and correlation lines attractions and division line communication and mystical cortex attractions in high level rotation system and travel calculation. Okay. So, it gets really interesting. I know it's very complicated, very, very high rise, extremely high rise, guys, but you've got to get informations of balance all through traction. Okay. All right. So the restructuring of your settings is really understanding how to modify through triangulation set locations. Let's say we get an X line C. That is the lines of DX, line conditions of ion line setting, ozone sphere, ozone line layer, lacing line communication of 3 line signals, sets correlation of 1 atom, and rotation surface into position of travel in flux capacitor line conditions of XT1000 location. All right. Triangulation line condition setting sets an 8-line rotation surface in triangulation. Okay. So center lines of coordinate setting and coordinates of platforms. The track location of provision lines has a 4-line signal in set location. Gets more complicated, right? Because it's nothing but what? A VR system in calculations to a setting of atmospheres and line screens. All right. AVR, awareness in virtual reality. AVR. You're aware in your virtual reality. AVR. Okay. All right. So the awareness, coming line position location. So what is the awareness? What does that mean? What does that awareness mean? It's a track provision in your ethers. It's an A-track provision. Okay. Nothing go above the A line setting. You go past the A line, you come into B line. You come into B line, you come into C line. Right? So you have to understand the awareness and the balance location of this compute system. 3-line triangulation lines, ether core lines, information line cycles, and 4-track provisions, and 2 panels, 3 correlation line conditions of solar sail and traction. Okay? All right, so now you understand what awareness is. It's the ether core. And so you become more aware and conscious of what you're doing through your subterranean setting. You have a correlation path and a 12-line measure. The center core system of your Earth rotation just high rises faster and faster. Puts lines of communication setting in line track location. This is your mind. Okay? Your mind is on an angle, right? Because it's coming back to you. It's coming back to you, right? So when you get a provision line cycle, it's like this. You try to find the balance, your signal line communication, everything's off calculation line system. But if you get a position of switching, there's the focus. So wherever you go, line signal, balance communication, you're in yin and yang. Process of communication, the hand. Don't look at the hand, look at everything else in the back. Don't look at me, look at the cars outside. And then you'll see everything in front disappear and reappear all at once in vortex, and it will go in position of where it's supposed to be in its modulation screens and adaptation of its VR system. It's very powerful. When you stop looking at the hand, don't look at me, look at the back. Always look beyond, right? and then you see this move, me move, and everything else. Right? So that's what you're doing. Right? So it's really interesting. Once you get a 45 line angle, 45% location sets lines according to line setting, 1 awareness line rotations, balance core, descending, compute screen interference. Puts communication lines of center, 24,000 line connections on levels, 24,000 light years away in Earth line and rotation in real time and track location. So your Earth spins on cycles, guys, and travel. Okay? That's what it is. So the farther it goes, the Earth goes into the mine itself, comes back in setting, comes back in center of pi, and then it evolves into all calculation all at once in all timelines and set location. Phase recognition of all space and time. Hoo-ah! All right, so I think you guys understand the attractions now when it comes in your universe line condition, your settings, understanding your calculation settings, your atmospheres, your balance lines, your atom line interference, or your awareness location, your solar generation screens, in solar sail, and set location of graphs, and set design, right? Very complicated formula through equation. You're going to have to watch this over and over and over and over and over until you understand all lines of view is nothing but communication, okay, to your avatar. It's that location, right? Communication to your avatar, communication to your higher self, communications to your sim, okay? All right, so that calculates and modifies when you get in line rotation cycles and generation screen lines. So the 8-track division is interesting too because it changed the ether core, changed the direct signal location of Earth and platitude line screens, high interference of center communication. Now, direct lines of platforms, the spacing line has to really get into platform communication of balance, how they go through core settings. Tracking provisions lines, you don't want to be off in communication like this because of off its position and it'll send a core in this direct signals and create a black hole in the opposite direction. Okay, you don't want that because what's going to happen, the actual position locations in line settings of your sim or your avatar will be sucked in through a vacuum set location. You see it? Oh, right? So if you lose your thoughts, you're in a black hole. You forget where you are, you're in a black hole. You don't remember where you are, you're in a black hole. You're trying to understand what's going on through your memory, you're in a black hole, right? It's getting out of the black hole, being aware consciously of what you're doing when you are in space through navigation. So you really have to understand how to use your communication encodings all through delta headings, guys, all through delta. Position lines of center, this is all that expands. So you're in position of this setting set locations, 1, 2, and 3 set location. That's all it is. So it all comes together from this angle to pi and communication is setting of face recognition. So this stays in the center, which is your flywheel, but your flywheel goes everywhere, all at once, 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 everywhere, all at once. Okay, all at once. Okay, so the center core never leaves. The mind does everything in traction. All right. The center core system is really understand how to use the graphic calculation line setting to your streams. Now this allocates position. This is really interesting. The position line calculation line setting is all levels of graphs. Okay, graphs on a 45 in position on a 3 angle and line rotation. Right? Track division lines, X, zeros, X, tic-tac-toe. Trying to find the platform communication of the system. All levels of communication line settings and communication of what? You never win, right? So there's nothing to win because there's nothing against. There's nothing against of anything, is there? So if there's nothing against, there's no competition with anything, is there? I think we're understanding the actual game of tic-tac-toe now. It's all modified through your minds, guys. That's all it is. Recycle logical line connections of pi, generate screen lines, high center, inference of center, operates the system, all can modify because there's nothing in past correlation. So this comes together in a triangulation line condition of box line rotations. This comes in position, this comes in position of triangulation line condition system. It all comes one setting, all one unit, all process, all one locations, all timeless, all shapeless, all formless, all communication center of operation of the interaction. Done by equation, people. Done by equation. Okay? We're done. So how everybody feel about that? All right? There was a lot said. So you have to take time. Take 5-10 minutes, drink your waters, okay, and position locations. All right. Hem does open up the portal for you guys. And when you get on, we go in position right away. Okay. So we're trying application alphabet. See you soon. Adios.